What is up, guys? So the Arrowverse has given us a lot of really great superhero and supervillain costumes since the beginning, and this year has been no exception. Even though we're barely halfway through the season, we have already seen a lot of great costumes, and that's what I'm going to be going over for this video. The top 5 best looking new Arrowverse costumes from the new seasons being Supergirl, Arrow, The Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow, and also Freedom Fighters, the Ray. There may be a costume on this list that was introduced in a previous season but didn't really get any spotlight until this season, so I included it either way. Before we start the video though, there are honorable mentions like all of the Freedom Fighters. They're not on the list, even though I think the Black Condor's costume is especially really cool, but he's not on the list because we don't know how the costume looks in live action, so I can't really count it. Also, Killer Frost and Citizen Cold get an honorable mention. But with all that in mind, let's go through the top 5 new Arrowverse costumes, starting with number 5. Number 5 is the Ray. The Ray was introduced in the Crisis on Earth X crossover with a live-action costume, and his Earth X counterpart was on Freedom Fighters The Ray with the same costume, but this time animated. So we've seen the costume. We've seen what it looks like in both live action and animation, and it looks pretty good in both. So that is one of the reasons it's on this list, just because it looks good in both animation and live action, and we've seen it in both. When promotional photos for the crossover came out, a couple of them featured the Ray, and his helmet definitely looked a little disproportionate to his head. But when the crossover came out, we saw the helmet in action. It looked fine when he was using his powers. When he wasn't, it still looked a little disproportionate to his head, but that's only when he was just walking around, because when he was powered up, the helmet was glowing. It looked really good, and so does the rest of the costume. It has this cartoony effect just like the rest of his powers. That to me looks really cool. I just really like the cartoony effect. When he's glowing with the yellow glow, the Ray looks pretty cool.
I'm gonna kill you.
Number 4 is Rain. Rain is the main villain of Season 3 of Supergirl, and so far she's been a really good one. Just definitely the best main villain of Supergirl ever. Even though that's not really saying much, she's still pretty great so far. And when her costume was revealed earlier this season, I think it was around semester, the costume was revealed, and I didn't really like it. I thought it looked a little bland and colorless, especially compared to the comic book version. Actually, you know what? I remember the costume was revealed around when episode 4 came out, so that was like in late October. So back then when the costume was revealed, I thought it looked a little bland and colorless, especially when you compare it to the comic book version, who has white skin and fully black eyes and red hair. So I was pretty disappointed when the costume was revealed and it had no color, and Rain didn't have any of the alien characteristics of the comic book version. But over time, the costume grew on me more and more, and once we finally saw Rain and the costume in action, it looked really good. The colorlessness, or basically the blackness, worked in its favor whenever they were fighting, when Rain and Supergirl were fighting at night, because it made her look more menacing and less silly. It just looked great in the fight scenes at night. Just like Zoom and Dark Archer, who are the darker, more powerful counterparts to the main villain during their seasons, Rain is the darker, more powerful counterpart to Supergirl, and the costume definitely reflects that. Number 3 is Black Canary, and this is the Dinah Drake Black Canary, not like Black Siren or Laura Lance or something, just because none of those guys or girls got a new costume this season. So there have been multiple Black Canaries, and with that, multiple Black Canary costumes. We had the first Canary costume, which was Sarah Lance. It looks pretty good. Then there was the Black Canary costume from Season 3 and 4, which was also pretty cool. And also the Black Siren costume, which debuted in Season 2 of The Flash, which I don't really like. But after all that, there is yet another new Black Canary with a new costume, and that costume looks really, really cool. It's almost all black, which makes sense since the hero's name is called Black Canary. But the little bits of yellow, like the lines of yellow, add a little bit of color, which makes it look even better. Just that tiny bit of extra color really makes it better than the other Black Canary costumes for me. The mask looks really cool. Just The whole costume looks really cool. The yellow makes it look like the new 52 Canary costume, which had a lot of yellow in it. This is just a little bit of yellow, but the fact that it looks like the new 52 costumes, which in general the new 52 had the best costumes for like every single superhero, so the fact that it looked like that costume is pretty cool, and that's why it's on the list. Even if it didn't look like the new 52 costume, it just looks really cool in general.
And how you've squandered the potential of two worlds. On our Earth, we've developed a meritocracy. We've accomplished greatness.
Number 2 is Overgirl. Crisis on Earth X introduced us to Earth X versions of the main Arrowverse heroes, being Black Arrow and then Overgirl, and also kind of Reverse Flash, but not really. And while none of them were really that great, except for the more minor Earth X counterparts like Prometheus and Quentin Lance especially, although not really Prometheus, just the 1 or 2 scenes he was in, the one scene where he was unmasked, he was pretty great. So while none of the main ones were anything special, Overgirl's costume really stood out as a really awesome costume. Ever since the promotional photos for Crisis on Earth X came out, I've noted on how cool Overgirl's costume actually is. I've always said how it's the best Earth X costume, that's for sure. The red and black just really work together and make her more menacing, and the red and the black clash really well, and it just makes the costume look really cool in general. It also worked really well, better than any other costume, with the color theme of the Nazis, what they used in the crossover, like with the black, red, and a little bit of gray. Speaking of gray, in the Freedom Fighters of the Ray, we saw a different variation of the costume, which had more gray than black, like the crossover version did, and I don't know which version I like more. Both of them look really cool. The gray one's more comic book accurate, but the black one probably works better in live action. So I'm just gonna say that both of those costumes basically tie for number 2, but the fact that Overgirl, the live action one, is live action, so we don't actually know what the gray one looks, how it looks in live action. So I'm just gonna go with the black one. It just looks really cool. It's really too bad the character herself didn't live up to my expectations. Because of how cool the costume looked, I expected her to be a really great character, but she really wasn't. The costume looked way better than the actual Supergirl costume, and I just expected her to be a better character than Supergirl. But she's not, but forgetting that, the costume looks amazing, and that brings us to number 1.
Barry. You came back to me.
And number 1 is The Flash. Like I said earlier, there's a costume on this list that was introduced in a previous season, being season 3, but the costume in that episode only had like 5 minutes of screen time, and when it was being used, it was only in the dark, so we weren't really able to see it, but it wasn't fully used or put into the spotlight until season 4, the premiere of season 4 of The Flash, where we saw it in the sunlight for more than 5 minutes, or we saw it for more than 5 minutes throughout the season, and the costume is nothing short of amazing. It is the best Arrowverse costume ever, and the costume has this brighter red color compared to the previous costumes, which were all a little bit darker red that I really never liked. The brighter red looks a lot better, and it is more comic book accurate. And yeah, this costume is incredibly comic book accurate, just comparing it to the new 52 Flash costume, because like I said about Black Canary, the new 52 had all of the best costumes for all the DC superheroes, in my opinion. Just comparing these two costumes, they look exactly, or basically, the same. From the emblem sticking out instead of being a part of the costume like it was before the new 52, to the lightning bolts going off to the side of the top of his chest, just like in the new 52, which is insane how much detail they put into this costume to make it look exactly like that one. That's another thing about this costume that I'll talk about in a second. And then there's also the yellow belt, the yellow things, the yellow lightning bolts around his arm. This costume is the definition of comic book accurate, but that wouldn't really matter if the costume didn't look good. And it does. It looks incredible. Just all the detail put into it to make it look like the new 52 costumes, like I just said, is outstanding to me. It's incredible. And this costume is the best Arrowverse costume, period. So those are my top 5 favorite new Arrowverse costumes. Which is your favorite new costume? Let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.